Okay, so just to summarize, so a healthy emotional processing situation here is that when a person bumps into something, okay, bumping into my partner not liking something I do, my partner not doing something I don't like when the partner does, okay, and then we have a primary emotional response. And everybody has primary emotions. Because of our learning histories, because of our conditioning, we may jump very quickly to secondary emotions. Okay? In the same way, at the end of a relationship, when we crash and burn, the other person walks into the room, we quickly go to anxious apprehension, irritation, anger, fear. I mean, when in fact, the situation requires none of those. The person walks into the room, isn't doing anything, the emotion might be pretty neutral, or it might be a tiny little bit of curiosity. Huh, what's up? You know, there's not a lot of emotion inherent in that situation. Okay? So when we bump into that, we have a primary emotion, and then of course our relationship to that emotion when we're regulated is we simply allow it. It just is what it is. If it's small, we don't do anything except ride it through. If it's big, we notice it, but also ride it through. We don't have reactions to our reactions. Reactions to our reactions, of course, are the kiss of death. That's where all the suffering, emotional suffering in the world lives, is in our reactions to our reactions. Right? If we just, all of us, all had our primary emotions and loved our primary emotions, boy, what a different world we have. Okay? But that's, of course, not the real world. So, interest and self-validation, curiosity and interest are a really nice antidote. We'll go back into that. And then, of course, because we're allowing the emotion, when we talk about it, we're actually being descriptive, and it makes sense. Because our emotion makes sense in light of whatever happened, whatever the event was. And because it makes sense, and because we're descriptive of it, other people understand it. If I tell you, oh, you know, I don't know, my dog died, I'm feeling really sad. Not hard to validate that. That's not hard, it makes sense. You know, if I say, my dog died, I'm really pissed off. My 16-year-old arthritic dog died, I'm pissed off. Hard to, you know, huh? It's very hard to validate. Oh yeah, of course you'd be pissed off about that. No, that's not true. There's missing, something missing there, right? How did I get there? Well, probably, you know, some convoluted way that included some judgments, you know. It's my wife's fault, you know, she didn't take the dog to the vet earlier. 16-year-old arthritic dog, you know, poor thing was limping around in great pain, and when my wife did take the dog to the vet said, yeah, I think it's time to put the dog down, and she agreed. And I'm pissed off about it. Is this right now? Now it kind of makes sense, but if you're not a therapist, you're still confused. Huh? What's wrong with you? Right? It's easy to invalidate. In fact, what you are invalidating is invalid. My anger doesn't make sense, except psychologically how I get there through my judgments, and maybe I can't stand sadness and grief. I mean, there are a lot of things that could be going on there. But if you're not a therapist, you're just thinking, what's wrong with you? Especially if you're my partner, and I'm yelling at you for being such an idiot, and I'm pissed off at you for killing my dog. You see? Ouch. You know, there's a lot of invalidation that's going to go in both ways. Now, I want you to notice that I'm invalidating you, and you're going to invalidate me back, and then we're off to the races. This is not a nice situation. Okay? But if I can just hang on to the primary emotion, and I say, I'm just so sad. I'm just so sad about it. You know, you took the dog to the vet and agreed to have the dog put down. And I'm just so sad. You're just going to hold me and say, of course you're sad. You know, of course. You're just going to be sad together. How great is that? You know, I mean, and if we have to problem solve, we can problem solve because we're regulated. We can do that. And we go on. Arousal goes down. That's the natural course of an emotion. By the way, an average emotion takes between 2 and 9 seconds for the average emotion to fire, you know? So it only stays with us and becomes a mood when we keep refiring the same emotion. Which means that we've got every 2 to 9 seconds, we get the chance to get off that emotion onto a new one. So it's kind of an interesting idea. It's kind of like having a freeway. You know, it's like there's an exit. It's not like driving through Wyoming, where you have to wait 37 miles before you get to the next exit, or 137 miles. You know, it's like driving through New York. You know, okay, wait 30 seconds, there's another exit. All right, every half mile there's another exit. Okay, you can get off it pretty quickly. It doesn't even take that long. That's 30 seconds. Every 10 seconds, less than 10 seconds. All right, and then of course the negative stimuli are counterbalanced by positive stimuli. In a good relationship, okay, we might have a little bit of an unpleasant transaction. We get a little unkind to each other, but there's a buffer. Like we were kind to each other earlier today. And I can expect that we'll kind of do it again tomorrow. And so it buffers it a little bit. Okay, we go on. Okay, bump, 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 again and again and again. But over time, we're not getting dysregulated. Neither of us is getting dysregulated. Okay? Of course, what happens is when relationships get distressed, there are too few positives and too many bumps, relatively speaking. And this is where avoidance and withdrawal becomes completely toxic. Because when we withdraw from each other, we lose the opportunities to have the buffers, to have the goodies of the relationship, which are the reasons for which we're in the relationship in the first place. We get to enough aversive interaction, we start avoiding each other, and then boom, positives plummet, and all we've got left is the stuff that we have to do, which is usually pretty unpleasant. Okay? We're stuck there. Too much stress, too much conflict, too little closeness. We avoid, we get judgmental, and then we get stuck in secondary emotions, which aren't connected to the situation, right? And then, of course, we're stuck in a mutually invalidating pattern, and, of course, that increases demands. We increase demands on each other, and it's pretty unpleasant. Okay. Now, I want to tell you about this small study that one of my doctoral students and I did. I affectionately call this my grandmother study, because if my grandmother were alive, she would say, "They pay you to do this? I could have told you this." But in fact, they do pay me to do this. And I could have told me this too. But it's good to have data, okay? And in fact, believe it or not, nobody else had quantified this. So this just tells you what you already know. What we did is we took a bunch of people. This is negative emotional arousal, and we measured it actually in 4 different ways. Self-report, but also we measured it physiologically. Okay, we looked at heart rate reactivity, we looked at respiration and galvanic skin response, as well as just self-reports. Okay, and it turns out they all correlated very highly. So this is a cartoon slide showing you what essentially the pattern was for all of the dependent variables, all of the arousal variables. So what happens is we stress people out. They came into this experiment knowing that that was the whole point. So we want to see what happens under stress. We're just looking at stress responses. That's true. The stress responses here, the stressor, by the way, was just math problems. They were just simple arithmetic problems. They looked simple, but they weren't. We tricked them. I know, psychology experiment, okay? It turns out that our brains tend to add things either in columns or across, and we prefer columns because we're used to it. And so if you put numbers 3 across, and then another row, and then another row, so it's 9 numbers, even though they're only 2 or 3 digit numbers, it looks really easy because they're only 2 or 3 digit. But our brains don't do 9 numbers in our head. They just don't. We just don't. I mean, there's an occasional savant who can do it, but most of us, mere mortals, can't do it. So everybody gets the answer wrong every time. Of course, we time them, okay? And they can't use a pencil. And because we're sadistic, we were willing to tell them it was the wrong answer, even if they got the right answer. That actually didn't happen. They always got the wrong answer. Okay. So these time periods are basically, each one of these time periods, they're getting 3 math problems, and they're getting them all wrong. Okay? But they look easy. Okay? Make sense? That's the stressor. So it's not like we're exposing them to the elements or something. Okay? We're not doing anything that would probably be called torture. Although it wasn't all that. So you can see, it worked. They got stressed out. Okay? Everybody got stressed out. Now what we didn't tell them was that after we stressed them out, after every 3 problems, the experimenter was going to actually either validate or invalidate them. That they were going to be randomly assigned to either having a validating experimenter or an invalidating experimenter. Now it turns out interesting, that it's actually hard to get our experimenters to be invalidated. They're actually pretty nice people, but we found a couple who were really good at it. Okay? So what happens is they do 3 math problems, they get very distressed, okay, on all measures, And then the experimenter says, pauses and says, okay, so now you're the subject, and says, so how's it going? And you say, terrible. Terrible. Okay, now, tell me if I'm the invalidating or the validating experimenter. Who said terrible? Okay, terrible.
Terrible.
Terrible? What do you mean?
Well, I don't know why I couldn't get it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, this is a stressful, the whole point of this experiment is to stress you out. That's the whole point. Everybody is supposed to get stressed out.
Yeah. And I'm getting stressed.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Okay,
All right, so you ready to do another one?
Right.
Okay, everybody did. Okay, everybody did. Everybody mercilessly kept going. Nobody quit here. Okay? We had a handful of people teary-eyed, but I know. I was not the experimenter. I just want to be clear. Okay? Now, obviously, I was the validating experimenter. But I want you to notice not only were the words I used relatively validating, but I made eye contact, I had a soft-looking face, and my voice tone was gentle. Okay? Now, anybody ready to be... I'm sorry. Can I invalidate you this time? Okay. So how's it going?
Oh, terrible.
Terrible?
Yeah.
Watch my eyes. Huh. Really?
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Oh, God.
Most people don't freak out about this.
What?
It's just an experiment.
I just can't do it.
Yeah, but I don't get why you're so upset about it. They're just math problems. It's just an experiment. Obviously, I'm getting the eyebrows right. Okay. All right. 30 seconds to 2 minutes of this. 30 seconds to 2 minutes of either validating or invalidating responses. Yeah, your heart rate. Yeah, no kidding. Okay. Now, does this make sense? Now, you might think this is. It's a little funny. It is, but in the real world, these people actually. Some of them started to kind of crumble a little bit, and they all, by the way, 100% felt fine at the end. Of course, we debriefed them and said, this had nothing to do with you. This is my job. Here's the little thing. It says I was supposed to be invalidating. It didn't matter what you did. I was going to invalidate you. We set you up, and nobody filed complaints or anything. Everybody lived through it. Okay. And what happens is, exactly as your experience was, if we validated the person, now notice they get another 3 problems wrong, and then another 3 problems wrong, and another 3 problems wrong, and another 3 problems wrong. But look what happens. It becomes less stressful to go through what was the stressful activity. Okay? If we invalidate them, they can't get used to it. They stay. This is a kind of a ceiling effect. They don't get more distressed because they can't really, on our measures, get more distressed. They're kind of peaked out. Okay? But they can't get used to it. They stay distressed. It doesn't get better. Okay? Makes sense? Now, you probably know this already. Yeah?
I'm just wondering, was it for people who didn't have any diagnoses?
Yeah, good question. This original study was just a cross-section of ordinary people. Okay? We have since replicated it and compared people with borderline personality disorder to a normative sample. Any predictions? Any predictions? I don't have the slide, I'm sorry. Yeah, the pattern is exactly the same. Okay? What's different is the BPD folks start here. They start higher. And they go, because of the ceiling effect, it doesn't look like they really go up higher because our measures don't allow. This is like, if you have a thermometer that stops at 105 because you're supposed to be dead. It's like our BPD folks, their thermometer should go to 111. Okay? They should have been in spinal tap. It goes to 11. It just needs to go higher. And they're not dead. They're just totally miserable. So the pattern is exactly the same. When we validated them, it came down. When we invalidated them, it stayed up. It's just that their baseline was higher. So folks with BPD are doing exactly the same thing that non-BPD folks do, but they're more vulnerable in the first place. Okay? Yeah?
What I think is interesting is that it seems like this need for validation to decrease emotional arousal is innate.
It sure is. That's it.
Children. I mean,
Absolutely.
They make a mistake and they look to you, you know, how should I react?
Well, there's a classic study, I can't remember the author, looking at kids who, when they experience some frustration or some physical pain, like they fall down and bump their knee, and if the parent says, it's not that big a deal, okay, come on, there's no blood, you're fine, they actually report more pain than if the parent says, oh, you poor thing, that must really have hurt. The kid's more likely to say, no, it's okay. It's very interesting. So the validation really does soothe, and I agree. I think this is an evolutionary social function. That validation probably, we have to speculate, we can't go back 100,000 years, but I would guess, actually probably don't have to go back only more than 10,000 years till we had more language, but if you go back 10,000 years, that the function of validation is probably to communicate safety. Like, okay, you're in the group, we're going to take care of you, we understand what's going on, and therefore we're not going to make it worse. And the function of invalidation is actually, it's a big threat. It's a huge threat. Yeah?
I think another function is locating the source of stress.
Yes.
In other words, if, the examples you gave, where you're comforting, you're saying to the person, it's okay to experience difficulty.
Correct.
That was the design.
Right.
Because there's something wrong with you.
Exactly.
Whereas in the other...
right, if there's no existential threat there.
Like, what's wrong with you? You
right.
shouldn't be reacting this way.
Exactly.
So the person starts second-guessing their own feelings.
Absolutely. No, it's like an existential threat. It really is. It's like there's something wrong with me.
And that's why kids will react that way. They're looking for reassurance.
I completely agree.
There's nothing wrong.
Completely agree. And as you can see, now notice that this doesn't come down all the way. Okay? This is the pure stressful part that's got nothing to do with the social part. But look how much of this, 2/3 of this is social. 1/3 is the stressor itself. And I find that to be pretty interesting, which is why I think that our models of psychopathology that only look, and this is a zeitgeist, okay, that only look inside our brain, are missing, I would argue, are missing 2/3 of the picture. I mean, again, this is brain part, okay, this is the individual, I wouldn't say it's just brain, it's psychological and biological, but this is the part that's social and biological, if that makes sense, and psychological. Yeah, we had another, yeah, Fran.
I was just going to say that, and you can see this, across the board with parents and children and stuff, is trying to be validating and by saying, like, when you were talking about my dog died, I'm really sad to say, but your dog was really, really old and he really had a good life. So,
right.
And I feel like this is, I'm going to be in trouble for saying this, but...
All right, then we'll just put you in trouble for saying it.
Also with gender, that there's a more, I don't know if people have seen the video of the nail in the head.
Oh, what a great video, yeah.
It's like a woman...
It's not about the nail. Have you seen it?
Express, I'm feeling this, and then often my experience has been, not just with my husband, but with other couples, people, a man more often saying, well, if you just think of, not being able to sit with the discomforts of wanting to make the person feel better by saying, if you will think about this in a different way, you will feel differently. So it's meant to be validating, and yet it's invalidating.
Right. Well, that's right. It's meant, its intention, I would say its intention is kind.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that it's validating.
Right.
Right? Validation is about understanding the other person's experience. Now, you're not in any trouble, by the way. Let's just be clear. The gender difference stuff is tricky. So let me just say that I think that on the one hand, you're right, that we know that there's a gender difference on this, but we have to be careful because the vast majority of men and women are in the same cluster in the middle, the vast majority. And the tails are different, okay? So there are some differences, but the main effect is that men and women are more alike than not, but when we're different in predictable directions. So I don't want to make it seem like we're two completely different groups, because we're not. Actually, we overlap a lot. And we certainly have couples, that I'm sure you all have, that flip gender expectations. That happens too. So, but you're absolutely right. And the whole idea of validation isn't like, what would I need in this situation, but what do you need in this situation? That's the whole point of validation. So, like in this room, is anybody, who's warm in this room? Really? I'm the only one. Okay, so I'm warm. That's normal. That's normal, by the way. Okay, who else keeps their bedroom at 55 degrees besides me? Who else keeps 55? Okay, a few. Okay, good. We could get along. All right, so who's cold? Who's cold? Okay, and who's comfortable? All right, so we've got about 60 comfortable, 40 a little chilly, and one warm person. Okay? Two warm people. Thank you for the honesty. That's so validating. I'm sorry? Me too. Okay, I was just trying to soften it a little. I didn't want to be a freak. So, if you're the cool person, okay, the idea, and I'm warm, okay, and you're hot, right? Okay, the idea is to validate, like, not like you shouldn't be. Damn it, it's warm in here. Right? That is, from my perspective, something that is entirely experiential. Is there any such thing as a warm or a cold room? No. There's such a thing as a room that's 68 degrees or 75 degrees or 52 degrees, but warm, cold, sort of depends on who we are, what we're wearing, okay, whether we just got out of a sauna, okay, or just came in from a chilly outside experience, okay. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. And so validation is about being able to meet the other person where the other person is. Now that's, you'll see, the intervention here is relationship mindfulness, being able to pay attention to the other person. So, in our scheme of things, what of course we're going to teach people to do is to turn this around. Okay, all of our interventions are going to be about how to manage our own emotion in order to express ourselves more accurately. Now, if I had a three-dimensional slide, which I don't know how to do that yet. Of course, arousal, there'd also be another box down here. This person's arousal influences their ability to be validating or invalidating too. Okay? So we're going to help people manage their arousal, express themselves more accurately. That's self-mindfulness and accurate self-description. Okay? And then there's other mindfulness, paying attention to the other person, to be able to understand the other person's experience, which is easier if they're accurate, but we're going to teach couples and partners how to do this by looking behind the expression to what that person's experience probably is, even if that person's not expressing him or herself accurately. Now, parents know how to do this most of the time. You know, if you've got a 4-year-old and it's, you know, you've been having a lot of fun, kind of got a little lost in the time, and now it's time to go to bed. The kid's it's a little late, half hour later than the kid's usual bedtime. And the kid's kicking and screaming and making a fuss about going to bed, okay? And you're trying to get the pajamas on, and you're trying to get the teeth brushed. And the kid just says something like, you know, why are you so mean to me all the time, Mommy? Daddy, why are you so mean to me all the time? Okay, reasonably functional parents don't see that as accurate. They see that as coming out of vulnerability. Kid's tired, okay? Kid's disappointed because we were playing, we were having a good time, and now I put a stop to it. It doesn't make us mean parents. It makes us good parents. We're getting the kid to bed. This is a good thing, right? Not this chaos. Oh, you can stay up till 2 in the morning. That's fine. You're a 3-year-old. Yeah, 3-year-olds know best when they should go to bed, right? I mean, I hear that. I hear that occasionally in professions. I don't mean to insult anybody, but that's dangerous. I mean, some 3-year-olds might know, but many do not. Okay, it's kind of like, oh yeah, sure, eat the chocolate Pop-Tarts for breakfast if you want. That's fine, you know. Okay. Sorry, no offense if you're giving your kids chocolate Pop-Tarts. Well, we shouldn't do that. Well, maybe not every day. I don't know. All right. Anyway, you get the idea. So that's where we're going with this. All right. So the target is to flip this around and get people to be accurate in their expression, and for their partners to be validating in their responses. Okay. And to get this going in exactly the opposite direction. And just like the dysfunctional, dysregulated pattern is reciprocal, the functional, regulated pattern is also reciprocal. And so we can turn it around at any point, like any system, by intervening anywhere. So if we can get one person to start to validate a little bit, the other person will become more accurate. If we can get one person to become more accurate, the other person will become more validated. Yeah, there's just no, which is great for us because it has to be balanced with a couple. One person's not going to keep making changes and do things different than the other person. The other person doesn't move. The good news is if we can get one person to move a little bit, that other person is more likely to move. Okay. Doesn't always work, but that's the idea. All right, so the big picture here, and then I think I'm just going to highlight where we're going the rest of the day, and then take a short break, and then we'll come back and just start marching through the different interventions that we have for these different steps. Okay? First, we're going to talk about safety and focus our attention on, well, okay, all this is well and good, but what if the other person's inaccurate expression is swallowing a bottle of Xanax? Okay? Swallowing a bottle of Xanax, among other things, is, in this model, inaccurate expression. It's not clear how you coming home late from work tonight triggered my loneliness to such a point that it started a whole chain reaction of things where I didn't want to live anymore. Okay? Taking the whole bottle of Xanax, it's not clear what that's expressing. Okay? Did I mean to manipulate you and get you to come home early? What was that about? So we've got to start with safety. So we're going to talk about suicidal, self-harming, big safety kind of relevant things. Now, that starts first because we don't always have time to do really thorough assessment when there's a crisis, a suicidal crisis. So we have to actually be able to jump in and do that like right away. Then we'll backtrack a little bit and talk about, okay, if things are basically safe, there's no imminent harm threatening, then like how do we build out this program, starting with what are we looking for in our assessment, how do we get a commitment, what skills are we teaching. We start then with trying to stop making things worse, okay? Reduce invalidating responses, okay? That's probably the most important place. It's harder to get people to start expressing themselves accurately when they might get invalidated, because accurate expression, when you get invalidated, it tends to make people very gun-shy. They run away. It's hard to get them back. So we start by reducing the invalidation, rebuild relationships, build up some of those positives that have been missing, then move to accurate expression, and then to validation. Okay? Now, I'm laying this out as though this is linear. Of course it's not. Of course, anytime we can do any of these things, we do them. But there's a focus that we do as we go along. Now, this is a very strange therapy. Okay? Probably in a lot of ways. But most family therapies, most couple therapies, are focused on communication. I want you to notice, out of 9 steps, we don't get anybody to speak until step 6. We don't start working on communication until step 6. The first 5 steps are actually setting up communication, managing my arousal and my awareness before I open my mouth. We're more interested in this treatment for how to get people coming to the table than what they do when they get to the table, assuming that if they come to the table ready to perform, not ready to perform, the wrong word, but ready to participate in a way that's constructive, what comes out of their mouth is probably going to be okay. So we're less worried about the specifics of how they should say it, and more about being ready to open their mouth in a constructive way. So a whole lot of this therapy is about setting the table. Okay? And then we will, of course, work on accurate expression and validation. That's our big goal. We push problem solving and problem management way to the end. In my experience, and I was trained, by the way, different ways, but my original training was in behavioral couples therapy. You know, Jacobson and Margolin, Neil Jacobson is my dissertation advisor. Okay, I mean, I know how to do behavioral couples work, but we started with problem stuff, and for couples who are regulated, that was great. It's just that that's not most couples that I see. Now, I realize I might see a strange group of couples, but that's why you're here, because you're working with these same folks. And problem solving and problem management is actually rarely necessary if they can talk to each other in a regulated way. Because they actually often solve their own problems. That's why I think solution-focused therapy has right. What I think they get wrong is I don't think we should assume that people have the skills they need to do that. Some couples do. Clearly, some families do. I'm not saying they all don't, but the folks who are chronically dysregulated don't. They don't, by definition, they're chronically dysregulated. They're not knowing how to manage. So, and then of course we'll say for the end this kind of radical, like what do you do when you can't always get things that a lot of this is making things less awful, and then rapprochement here, and then it's like trying to make things better, and then how do you handle the things that you can't change that you wish were different? Okay, that kind of radical acceptance at the end. So, and hopefully we'll get here by the end of the day. So that's what we're going to do when we come back from our break.